Really simple one today, how to stick text to an object in Davinci Resolve. So here we are in the edit page of Davinci Resolve, and all the magic happens in the Fusion page, but it is really simple, so don't worry about that if you've not used Fusion before. So click on your clip and then we'll click on Fusion and away we go, and that brings us into the page here. Don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly the same as mine. I've just closed down the media pool which you might have here and a few other bits and bobs, just so we've got a nice clear screen to work on. What we want to do is find a frame where I can see the whole turbine. It's just easier if I can see the entire turbine. So that one looks pretty good to me, so I can see the base and the top. And I'm going to just zoom in a touch on the turbine. And to do that, I just hold Control and roll my mouse wheel, and that will let me zoom in. So what we want to do is track the position of this wind turbine within the frame, and you can track any number of ways, but what we want to track particularly is any left, right, up, down, and more importantly what we call Z movement, so backwards and forwards movement. Where is it in relation to the rest of the scene? So on media in 1 we'll give that a click, we'll press shift and spacebar and type PLANA, and that brings up our planar tracker. Hit enter and that goes into the node tree just here. What we want to do is draw around the object that we're going to track. Now you don't have to be super precise with this, but the more precise you are the better, because we don't want to pick up things like this hedgerow in the background here or any of the trees, because they will move at a different rate than the turbine itself. So we just want to collect, if we can, the turbine. So a little click on the screen and we just draw a box loosely, so it doesn't have to be precise. We're not having to capture the outline specifically of the turbine, because what the tracker looks for is contrast areas. So it will be looking, when it tracks this data, for contrast between the light of the turbine and the slightly darker field. Okay, so we've got that drawn around now. Come over to the right in our inspector and we hit set, and that's saying start tracking from this frame. Now don't worry that we're in the middle of the clip, we'll sort that out in a second. It says start tracking from this frame. The motion type, there's various ways you can track this, and what we want to track here is translation, rotation and scale, because we're going to want our word to get smaller as we get further away, so we need the scale to change as well. So we'll change that to scale, and we just hit this icon here, this icon here even, which is track to end, and that'll go away now and it'll start tracking that wind turbine. So you can see the little box we drew, it's just completely stuck to that wind turbine, and this will just take a moment. Right, so that's done now, and that's tracked all the way to the end, and all these little white markers here, these are individual keyframes of where it's moved that little box that we drew around. What we need to do now though is create a track backwards from that point. So we come back to the inspector, we hit go, and that returns us to here, and this time we're going to hit this side, which is the track to start. There we are, and once it gets to a point where it's tracking us all off screen, it stops. You don't need to do anything, it's just stopped. So now we've got all these little white marks, which are all these individual keyframes. I'm just going to scroll out again so we can see our whole frame. Now, the tracker node here, we don't actually need this any longer. What we do need to do is click on Create Planar Transform here. Click that and we get another node. There it is. So the planar tracker, we can actually get rid of that, just delete it. This transform node here contains all the data that was in that tracker node. Otherwise, every time you play on this, it will just recalculate, and we don't want it to recalculate. It's done it once. We just need to know the calculations it's done. So I take that transform node and I just merge it over my media in. Creates a merge like that. You can just put a merge in there, obviously, and connect that down. So we need a word. So let's come forward a little bit on our timeline so I can see that again. I want to see the whole turbine. And we'll grab a text node and we'll drop it in and we'll connect that to the transform, and in that text node I'm just going to type the word turbine. Nice and easy, because that's what it is. You don't have to type turbine, obviously, type whatever you like. In between the text node and the planar transform, I'm going to hit Shift and spacebar again and just type transform and drop in a transform mode. And what that lets me do now is mess around with the size and the scale and the position of the word turbine. So first thing we're going to need to do is change the angle. So again, in the inspector here, I'm just going to go with -90 just to turn it on its side. I'm going to drag it down to roughly where I want it to be, and then we'll just move it across a little bit as well. And you can see it's far too big at the moment, so we'll shrink that down until it's the size I want, and we'll just keep on moving it until it's where we want it to be. Okay, about there, that feels kind of good. So if we zoom in, we can see that's broadly on the turbine there. Now we could just rotate it a little bit more if we wanted, just to actually get it on the turbine, but I actually quite like it. That looks all right there, actually, doesn't it? Now that is bright white, and it will stand out as a little odd. So one thing I like to do, just to make it look a bit more realistic, is back in your text node, under the colour piece here, just take the little eyedropper and make it the colour of the turbine. Make it match the turbine. So it's not exactly white, and it just looks a bit nicer if you match it there. And on shading, just come up to opacity and just drop that ever such a touch, and it just looks more natural in the scene. Now we've stuck it to the turbine, we've coloured it right, so what happens if we hit play? It's now stuck to your turbine. As we fly away, it doesn't move, it gets smaller. And you can stick a word to absolutely anything that's contrast, you can stick it. And in the next video, I'll show you how you can stick it with a little bit of perspective as well, which is ideal if you're on a wall or a floor or something like that and you want to make the text look like it's going away from you. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. That's a really easy one, and it's great for titles and effects, or if you're doing some work and you want to call out distances on things, for example over a golf course or a building site, and you want to mark out how far something is, you can just stick your text to whatever you like. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.